Hello, I'm here with Ann-Michelle Levangie, the Director of Instructional Design at Stukent. Ann-Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hey, so I want to start by just getting a little bit of a sense for our listeners about Stukent and specifically your Simternships program. Can you start by just telling us a little bit about what Simternships are exactly and what problem you were aiming to solve in developing them?
Absolutely. Simternships were really kind of the founding element of what Stukent does. So it's the idea that it is an entirely simulated internship experience. So it's more than just a skills lab where you're practicing a tool. It's really a platform to allow students to enter an immersive world where they're responding to emails, responding to chats, working with colleagues to execute whatever the task is. Our curricula really started out focused on business and marketing, and that's still the majority of what we do. So it allows students to practice things like creating social media campaigns in a safe environment where they can mess up with low stakes. So it's not like, we hear all the stories about intern fails where they work for Netflix and accidentally email all over the world. We don't necessarily have those levels of mistakes built into the internships, but any mistakes don't have that fear of embarrassment or any kind of problem like that. And they get to practice, they get feedback on what they do. And it is aiming to bridge that theory practice gap, which to me is one of the biggest challenges in higher education. It's how you get from that scholarly academic pursuit of knowledge and the practice of the skills to what you actually do in a workplace, which is often very different and more complicated than what you get in the classroom. So we try to replicate some of that and at the same time give more students access to internship-like experiences.
Yeah. And so just walk me through a couple of technical aspects there. You said that they are responding to emails and getting feedback. Is that all simulated emails? And who is giving the feedback?
They are simulated emails. So the emails are usually kind of how we establish the context of what they need to do or deliver additional resources that they need to support whatever their assigned task is. So in a sense, that's just a real world tool we're using as a mechanism to deliver their instructions, their guidance, that kind of learning materials. And then they typically have a boss. So we use video content to have them have really one way, but chats with their boss. So it does feel like there's that interpersonal relationships that you have in a real internship and that you have mentorship. So some of their instruction comes from that boss. The feedback mechanisms we're not so sophisticated yet. We'll get there, where those come from a video response, but those are, modal pop-ups where they get the feedback.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. And you have a recent white paper around your E3 framework for the learning experience. Would you tell me a little bit about what is that framework and how do you apply it to these internships?
Absolutely. So the E3 learning experience is our framework, which is currently just for our higher education materials. But it's the idea that we're approaching curriculum in 3 major phases. So we start by engaging them with the career relevance. So we know that one of the major challenges with students in higher education right now is engagement and relevance. So this is really hitting that up front because they're looking at their education more than any students before as an investment. They want a job out of this. It's not just, kind of the old liberal arts model, which I don't have a problem with. But a lot of students are more focused on getting a job with good financial prospects right out of college, which is also harder than ever.
Mm.
So we start by, at every point we can, connecting our curriculum to how that supports their skill building and their competency building for the career they want. So creating that emotional connection and relevance for them. The next E is enrich. And that's where we bring in virtual work integrated learning. So that is a model of instruction that internships fall under, apprenticeships fall under. But what's specific about work integrated learning is it expects a curricular connection. So whereas most internships, it's kind of an independent thing that the student is doing, with our virtual internships, the idea is that at every stage of what they're doing, the instructor can make connections directly to that curriculum so that they understand that relevance again at every point. And then we have Encode, and that's where we get into just more traditional assessment models, but also experiential assessment models. So allowing for performance assessment and that practice that really encodes everything.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that what you're saying around this shift in higher ed, around shifting towards more demonstrable skills and competency is really interesting, and definitely what I've been hearing about the shift happening in that world of higher ed. And it sounds like Simternships are really able to kind of support that transition. How have you been able to convince higher ed institutions that are in a more traditional way and have been doing things the way that they've been doing for a very long time, that Simternships are kind of what they need and how they can help bring their students into modern jobs?
In my experience, we don't get a lot of resistance to the concept of experiential learning. I think people inherently see its value, but they also see how hard it can be to implement and how much facilitation it requires. So what we can give them with the Simternships is more of that turnkey solution, where it's not that they just like sit their students down in front of a Simternship and forget about them, but it takes away a lot of that facilitation work that they have to do. We have what we call innovation partners. So these are not just our authors, but also instructors that we work with and get a lot of feedback from. So we have some of our innovation partners that do true student agencies. We have some for marketing, some for PR, and it's phenomenal what they do. It's really incredible. And this is just like a little taste of that, because the work that they put into those student agencies is quite a lot. So if we can offer other instructors who are intrigued by that idea of giving their students that practice in a real world context without all the legwork and research and facilitation, then it becomes a pretty easy sell.
That does make sense. So then on the flip side, if it's an easy sell on the higher ed institution side, I'm guessing it's probably not going to be that hard of a sell on the hiring manager side either, right? If somebody has gone through these internship-like experiences and in theory has more hands-on real-world job experience, it seems like they would be more equipped for the job. It seems like that would be an easy sell, but in practice, how have you actually been able to communicate that? How do you coach up students on how to actually talk about the experience that they've had, and how do you make sure that hiring managers are able to get what they need to out of a Simternship artifact as opposed to a more traditional transcript?
When they complete a Simternship, they get a certificate of completion. And most importantly, what's on that certificate of completion is an articulation of the skills and knowledge that they've practiced that lead to those job competencies. So we're really giving them the language to articulate what they've practiced and hopefully mastered by completing this Simternship. And, you know, we hope to even go further with that and work on some workforce readiness materials. But at this point, it's really just about giving them the language to put metrics behind what they were able to accomplish. So, I did this virtual campaign where I had a KPI of, X number of clicks and I achieved Y. So those same kinds of things that we're all coached to do on our own resumes to quantify what we've accomplished, we help them quantify what they've accomplished through that Simternship.
Got it. That makes sense. Have you been able to track at all whether or not Simternship artifacts can shorten onboarding or improve early job performance?
I'm working on that right now with one of our innovation partners. We've been doing a pilot study with her on the social media marketing Simternship. So last semester, we were able to do a survey with her students before they started the Simternship, just self-evaluating their own understanding of marketing concepts, their familiarity with the tools, that kind of thing, how much they engage in critical thinking in making decisions about marketing. And then we gave them the same questions after. And that really showed an amazing improvement. It was exciting to see. And our next step is that she is going to reach out to some former students, and we're going to do a survey with some of them, with some employers, and then with just industry experts who come to the class and see what they're doing. So we're really trying to move forward with measuring that postgraduate impact.
That's really exciting. Congratulations on the early data. I'm excited to see what happens when you're able to complete all the rest of that. And so if you're doing this and it's going well, I'm sure that you're thinking a little bit about scalability. And my background here is actually in engineering. And so I'm hearing about these internships and I'm thinking, wow, that sounds very cool. And also like it could be kind of hard to build. There is obviously a lot of new technology around in the last 5 years, a lot of AI, a lot of things like that. How are you thinking about integrating any of those into your Simternships? Are you thinking about using AI to make them more scalable, easier to build, be able to actually have some of those chats that you said right now can sometimes just be one way? And how are you, as somebody who's so focused on learning design and instructional design, thinking about the pedagogy behind all of it?
So we're thinking about the AI from both angles, like both for the design and development efficiency. And then, of course, where can we implement it in the product to support adaptive instruction, personalization, all of that? Not to mention the fact that probably one of the number one concerns we hear from instructors is around cheating. So the more that we can use AI to vary up the inputs and that kind of thing, the less likely it is that students can, shall we say, benefit from each other's work. So we're looking into that, but we haven't executed it yet.
Okay.
So last year we had tested a model where we're using AI to deliver more personalized feedback. And it was good, but it wasn't great. And we decided we didn't want to implement it until it was great and reliable, and we could be totally certain that it wasn't hallucinating incorrect feedback for our learners. So, of course, that's my primary concern, is that if we are impacting their learning outcomes by giving them incorrect information through AI, then we're not ready to be doing that yet. So we're waiting for a little more predictability, a little more reliability on the AI to implement that part. But we've developed a lot of efficiencies because we are trying to scale up the sim development. And one thing that we recently did at Stukent is that there was a company-wide AI competition.
Okay.
So I don't remember how many entries we had. It might have been 20-something, maybe 14. And then we had 5 finalists. And the team that won used vibe coding to quickly develop interaction prototypes. So what that's allowing us to do is, as we're ideating on what a sim could be, like what interactions do we need to help the student demonstrate skill transfer, and we're coming up with these ideas, you can't always articulate what you're thinking in terms of an interaction. And, wireframes and Figmas only get you so far.
Mhm.
And what we can do now is really quickly create a prototype so that you can see that interaction, or at least a version of that interaction in effect, and know if that's what you want to move forward with. We can't directly integrate those prototyped interactions into the sim because they kind of lack some of the scoreability and other necessary elements, but it's a really amazing tool for rapid ideation and collaboration.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like the way that you're thinking about that. First, you all can use it to be able to make yourselves more efficient, to do the same thing that you're doing, just faster and better and easier. And then as the technology starts to get better and better, trying to put that actually in front of the students too. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and we also don't want to reinvent the wheel with what someone else is already doing. So, Khan Academy came out with Khanmigo, and that's an amazing AI-based tutoring tool. And now ChatGPT has their tutoring version, and all of these AIs are having their education-focused models. So then the question becomes, are we trying to reinvent that, or do we let them use it and then we use AI for our own purposes? So that's kind of the direction we're taking now.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. How are you coaching your learners on how they should be prepared to use AI when they get into the workforce themselves?
So last year we came out with a micro module, we called it. So it's basically a mini courseware, maybe the equivalent of a chapter of content that could be inserted into any of our other courseware on the essentials of generative AI. So really kind of developing that familiarity. And we are now expanding on that. And in just a handful of months at this point, I think, by the early next year, we'll be releasing our Generative AI Essentials courseware. So that's a full courseware to help students understand appropriate, effective, and ethical use of AI, not just in the classroom, but of course in the workforce. Because I think a lot of students are learning a lot about AI for the classroom in the institutions that are allowing it and not banning it. And it's all about academic integrity and how do you align with your institution's use policies. But then we're lacking that carryover to industry. So it's like, what do you need to learn about ethical and appropriate AI use in industry? Which, when you have to worry about not accidentally sharing intellectual property, not sharing customer data. So we're approaching all of those types of topics to make sure that they are using it to augment their skills and not to replace any critical thinking or other essential skills that we want them to carry over.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're going to start a little bit of a leg up. It's not like any of us who were working at the time that it came out had that kind of preparation. So they're going to have this like a little bit of a head start on everyone coming into it, actually knowing how they're planning on using any of these AI tools.
Yeah, and we really want to support instructors too, because that's a question we get a lot, which is, I want to start exposing my students to this so that they have it as a workforce skill and that they're using it appropriately, but I don't know how to teach with it. So we're doing a lot of support on that front. Even like, how can you use AI to scaffold an assignment? Or how can you create an AI-based assignment where it's not just a student treating it like Google, typing in a question and then producing something and handing it over? So how can you use it as a thought partner instead of a shortcut?
Yeah, how can we model good use for the learners too?
Exactly.
Great. Well, I actually want to transition a little bit into what you guys are looking forward to, especially with all these new technologies and all of the work that you're doing and all of the ways that you're evaluating it. And you have all these great internships. And one thing that's really standing out to me is it must be really increasing access right? People that might not normally have the ability to go get an internship can do a Simternship. And it sounds to know there's probably no limit on the number of people who can do the same Simternship at once. Do you think that a simulation could ever replace a real internship? And if so, is there anything that you think is lost there that you are thinking about trying to build into Simternships going forward?
We never say that they can replace an internship, but we don't like to see them as second best either because of what you just said. Like, internships will never have the accessibility that these virtual versions have. Inside Higher Ed in late 2024 published this, that there are 8.2 million college students who want an internship in this country. 3.6 get one, 3.6 million, and only 2.5 million report having a quality internship. So that's
okay, so about a quarter.
Just over a quarter of students get the quality of internship that they want. So we can level the playing field with the virtual version. They're not no cost, depending on the institution and what support that it can give, but they're very low cost. And when we talk about that model of work integrated learning, the idea is that it has those continual curricular connections, right? So this makes sure that all of the students are having aligned experiences. So an instructor can effectively connect the experience that each student is going through with what they're learning in their course. And that's not something, if every student is off doing some different kind of internship, that is next to impossible. You could do personal reflection exercises, but it's harder. So this really is about increasing access. Students who are working part-time, students who have children to care for, or have incredibly long commutes, they can still do this because it doesn't require the travel, the expense, the time commitment that a real internship might, because those truly are a privilege.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And especially if they're able to be connected to the curriculum, there's even a bit of an advantage to using a Simternship, or at least something that you don't get always, that is like an add-on to being able to use a Simternship. If you could take one thing from an in-person internship and bring it into the Simternship, maybe you haven't done it because it's just not a feature you've built yet, or because it hasn't been possible yet, what would you bring in?
So at Stukent, our competency model. So what we try to build for students, we define competency as the combination of knowledge, technical skills, core skills, and attitudinal skills. I think you learn a lot of attitudinal skills at a real internship. You learn how to interact with people. You learn about punctuality and work ethic and all of those things that are harder to execute in a virtual model. That said, I'm always kind of ruminating on how we can get those elements in there more. So how can we increase the core skills that they're practicing, and how can we start to expose them to some of those attitudinal skills that they need to develop?
That makes a lot of sense. Are you building any of that right now?
We're definitely working on the core skill part. So making sure that every round of a Simternship has some element of workplace context or surprise or interpersonal complication, that kind of thing. So when you're practicing something in a classroom, it's kind of always the ideal situation, right? And then you get into the workplace and you're in the middle of a project and they cut your budget in half. That's the kind of thing we want to replicate, because those are the things you don't typically encounter in a classroom assignment.
Yeah. One other thing I'm thinking about that, if you have an internship and you have some challenges to your attitudinal skills and you're able to meet them well, one thing that you get out of that is a recommendation. Right? Whoever was managing you during the internship, when you go to apply for a full-time job, might say, here are some of the soft skills that we saw that the student did really well. Is there anything that you all are doing in these internships to be able to communicate that same kind of thing to a potential employer?
Not yet, but what we're working on is really developing a framework of core skills to sit behind the Simternship in the same way that like a framework of learning objectives does, so that we can start to quantify and measure that. And that's hard. Like we've talked about bringing in a psychometrics expert to say, how do you measure something like adaptability? And those are the kinds of things, absolutely, we want them to be able to articulate to an employer as something that they bring to a role.
Okay, so you're thinking about it from the psychometrics perspective, almost like what would it look like if they did show this, and then how do we go backwards and actually build it into the internship? That's really interesting. It's like backwards by design. I guess same as any other learning objective.
Yes. Greg Wiggins, I got to work with him before his passing a little bit.
That sounds really interesting. When you think about this in the context of higher ed overall, beyond just what y'all are doing at Stukent, if higher ed were to be able to change one structural thing in order to better prepare students for the modern workforce, what do you think that they should change from all the work that you've been doing?
In terms of what they're educating students on, or in terms of the structure of institutions themselves?
I would actually say both. If you could change something about how we are currently implementing higher ed and how we are currently preparing our students for the workforce, what would you do differently?
I would not have things like workforce readiness programs or, their employment support programs not be a siloed department. I think the workforce readiness needs to be a part of all courses in a curriculum, because more and more it is those core skills that the students need to be successful in the workforce. You can learn technical skills. So you need to show that you have that ability to learn and master knowledge and technical skills. But at the end of the day, it's those core skills that are going to help them survive the speed of change that we're seeing right now. Because you can learn a tool. You could, a marketing student can learn Hootsuite, and then they get to the workforce. Is that going to be there in 3 years? Who knows? But if they learn that skill of being able to adapt to new software and quickly onboard themselves, then that's the kind of thing that's going to make them successful in the workforce. So I think the more that those readiness skills can be worked into the curriculum, I think that's going to really be a shift in higher education and increase its value in the eyes of students.
I like that. Is anyone doing that right now that you've seen?
There are some. Yeah. I had a conversation with a potential research partner who was doing just that. She was really is making it her mission to integrate workforce readiness into everything she's doing, not just to support the students in getting a job, but again, to increase that engagement by showing them relevance at every point.
In order for that to happen, do you think that that's a policy change at the institution level, a curricular change for whoever's creating the courses, or more of a cultural change in terms of what students and employers are wanting from higher education?
Probably both. I think in higher education, just like the medical field, maybe, people tend to do things the way they learn to do them. So those old ways get carried forward. And I think that's relaxing a little. People are more willing to disrupt and have innovative ideas and accept that we might need to adjust our curriculum to meet the needs of students. And it's not us, lowering ourselves to some lesser standard, but it's us seeing that they have a need, which is that they don't just want a liberal arts degree. They want to get a job where they can support themselves in a really tough economy. And we need to be adding to our curriculum to make sure that they have what they need to do that.
That makes sense. I think I agree with you then. It's cultural, it's curricular, it's policy. It's got to all work together.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I want to close by bringing it back to your learners in the Simternships. Would you just tell me what is one thing that students do in Simternships that really surprised you, that you weren't expecting them to do, that they have been doing while going through these virtual internships?
I think the most fascinating piece of feedback I read from students, where this might have been our public speaking Simternship. So you'll appreciate the irony here. Their biggest criticism was that they didn't like having to put themselves on video. Which I understand. You know, so few of us want to listen back to ourselves and hear our own voice, that kind of thing. But also, it's not something I ever would have expected from the TikTok generation. Yeah. They're constantly putting themselves on video. So for that to be the biggest piece of negative feedback we got was fascinating to me. But also showing that that is a core skill that we need to be teaching. If they're uncomfortable with that, then we need to give them the tools to understand, first of all, you're going to have to be on video probably in the workplace. We're all on video calls all the time. And everyone is uncomfortable. Not everyone. A lot of people are uncomfortable with it. So just know that that's a normal feeling. And, you know, give them tips on you can redo a take. You can slow down and not be so nervous. I don't know offhand what the tips would be, but to me, that when you see consistent feedback on the same thing in a negative way, it's just an opportunity for, okay, how can we be supporting them better if they're also uncomfortable with this? But
it's so interesting, especially because I would actually say that's a pretty true to life part of that simulation. You're not only having to be on video because you're in a simulated internship, that's actually just preparing you for this world that we're in, where we are all on video calls all the time. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. No, I agree with you.
I suppose the nuance is that they get to review the video before they submit it. So maybe the uncomfortable part is watching themselves back.
Live stream. Maybe that maybe they'll like it better. Awesome. Well, Ann-Michelle, thank you so much. This has been really interesting to get to hear all about all of the work that y'all are doing. Final quick piece of housekeeping. If listeners want to learn more or request a demo, how can they learn more about Stukent?
So we're at Stukent.com. So that's Stukent. And you can download the white paper for the E3 learning experience at Stukent.com/E3LX.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelsey.